Okay, I don't even know, man. Okay, that was Attack on Titan, Season 4, Part 3, Part 1?
Maybe.
I
don't know.
All
I know, it was like an hour of Attack on Titan.
Yo.
So that was an experience.
It didn't even feel like an hour to me, dude. It felt like it was a good 30 minutes, 35 maybe. Like, I did not, like, I was like, okay, we're gonna get another chapter, no worries. You know, at least one more before it ends, and then it ended. Ended.
I actually did feel like it was long, not in like a bad way, but I felt like there was so much in there, and they didn't, like, you know, rush it with the pacing.
Was so good.
So, like, that's how I know that it was a substantial amount of time, because of how much was in there, how many times I, like, cried, or was almost brought to tears from different events. You know, that the pacing was just on point for that.
Oh my god.
Roller coaster.
All right. So, it's interesting. So, typically, what we do when we're at a loss for words is go through the episode chronologically. This episode's an hour long, so that might be a little difficult to really, you know, break it down in that whole thing.
What are you thinking? Scenes that we're, like, drawn to?
I'm thinking that if we have any notes, call them out, and then that will probably refresh some other things as well. Oh my god. Okay. So one of the first things I have and just want to talk about is the fact that Halil and Ramsey opened up the episode, and I didn't think that it would happen, and it's such a small decision in a way, but it's so well done.
Right.
It's so good.
Right.
It's great.
Like, it's in hindsight, it's not a small decision.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but to me, when it first started happening, like, when it started playing out, I was like, okay, why are we seeing these kids again? Like, oh, I mean, I guess that makes sense. But then to get that kind of ending of what we saw before was the kid already running away and waving back at Eren, and Eren being very emotional, and the Mikasa conversation, and then going down to drink with all the friends, you know? We never got how Eren ended up with this kid, and what he said to this kid, the emotions he was feeling when he was looking up at the sky crying, and Mikasa was witness. Like, once I realized and the scene started playing out, I was like, whoa.
Okay, sidebar there. If Mikasa, we asked this last episode, if Mikasa had said something different, would anything have changed? Because, you know, I think that because of how this episode started, it's warranted asking that question again.
Yeah.
Because Eren did ask, right? I wonder if there was any reality that if she said more, Eren would have helped her or let her shoulder some of it. But from the first 5-10 minutes, I got the entire idea that Eren completely believes there is no way to change the future, and because of that, I don't think it mattered what Mikasa said. You know what I mean?
I think he probably took from the language he was using and kind of the attitude he had toward his plan, it seemed like a solution or changing it was not even an option.
It wasn't possible.
It wasn't possible. It wasn't an option, and he just knew that this was the future. And he even looks over, he's like, I saved this. But then there's this dilemma here where he's like looking over at this kid, and he's like, I've seen this kid in the future, I know I save him. And then he goes to save him and then turns and walks away, but then he still makes the choice to turn back around and save this kid.
Yeah.
So there's this interesting thing that we're seeing here where the dialogue of, like, it's fated to happen, it's gonna happen, is being said to us at the same time that we're seeing that he's making choices because he knows that that is what leads to a certain future that he's seen, and not and so then there's this weird free will debate that is there.
I would love to get into that a little bit, because the idea of free will and freedom is such an important, like, theme in this episode and the whole series. So correct me if I'm wrong. Hypothetically, depending on how this story ends, could there exist another reality in the future where somebody has the power of the founding Titan and royal blood and makes that connection again and could do a similar thing to what Eren has done? if at the end of the series the Eldians are still alive and the Titan powers are continuing, like it's being passed still, then I think that possibility exists. And if that possibility exists, then I am on board with the side of being able to change a future that you've already seen. I guess, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting, right? Because obviously we have Grisha being like, why are you letting me see this? What am I seeing now? He's seeing these things that are happening. But to a certain degree, that him seeing some of that stuff was happened because of the actions Zeke and Eren took, right? Like, they weren't doing it specifically to change what Grisha did necessarily, but it just happened that way, right? Like, do you think that Eren's visions are set in stone when he has them of the future?
Well, I mean, I think that it's more that you see from this current moment where is the future, you know? And he is kind of piecing together, I guess, how to achieve that set future. It does make me wonder if at all things had changed slightly, or if he sees that no matter what he does that goes against what he's seeing, it still ends up the same. It could be that this whole time Eren's been trying to act in ways that maybe fights against it, and no matter what, it still ends up with him doing this at the end of the day. For maybe the reasons have changed that he ends up doing it, but I think that maybe he's seeing that he can't go against it. And I think that fits with, I think that brings the beginning with the end of this episode with what Armin says as he's jumping out of the sky. Like, Eren, are you really free? Like, something of that effect. He says something like that as he's jumping out of the sky. And I think that kind of brings the episode all together with what I'm thinking and feeling of. So, okay,
so in what way are you free, right? That's the question that Armin posed.
Yes.
It's interesting, like, because at that point, if Eren isn't truly free because of the seeing what will happen and you cannot change it, then is anybody really free? Because within those memories of future things happening, those things have happened a certain way that are predetermined, that affect other people's actions to lead to that point. You know what I mean?
But we also have this element of the founding Titan.
Yeah.
Where we got that discussion on the airship with Reiner, who was basically like, I feel like anyone who had the founding Titan like Eren would probably, what did he say, like, want to die? That's like, that's a really quick, like, putting everything into a little...
A really
paraphrased, simple idea.
Well, it's like the idea of, like, you're... as Eren is having this weight on him, right? And he is going forward with it, and in his, like,
there's this
bearing it.
Responsibility weight, but I think there's also already been this idea of a lack of freedom tied to the founding Titan from the moment this show started.
Yeah.
We got the whole, but it's the king's will, and so the founding Titan can't act against it. But then Eren could break through that because, blah, blah, blah. Attack Titan. And why did I just say blah, blah, blah? It's complex.
Yeah, it is.
And, but I think that what kind of, like, that strikes me, that conversation, but also I felt this kind of, not creepy feeling, maybe unsettled feeling when we got the final look up at child Eren in front of, when they were all looking at him and running toward him, and then they realize that they've run toward him and now they're back where they started. And you see two figures in the distance instead of one now, and it's Ymir beside him. And there's this kind of unsettled feeling of Ymir was trapped by people and forced into a certain role by people, and her freedom taken away, and she was calling to Eren all this time. And now it almost seems like she's enacting that same thing that happened to her onto him, possibly, was that feeling I got when I saw that.
I think the idea of freedom is, like, such a strong, like, theme to go with, right? Because, and the free will, whether it's an illusion or not, if the people within that illusion believe that they are truly free, then in reality they are. And regardless of what Eren has potentially seen even further than what we've seen now, he is 100% giving freedom and free will, or at least the illusion of it, to all of his friends.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like a great thing to bring up, is like freedom versus the illusion of it. But then now that you've broken through that illusion, now you're like probably feel even less free than you did before.
Yeah.
Like, when we started this show, it was like the walls and they were being kept in the dark and their memories were erased. But like a lot of people were living happy lives, you know, doing their business, marrying who they want, having a family, working their jobs, you know?
Yeah.
And we're living in somewhat of a peace, other than the people that decided to go outside the walls to fight for humanity. But like everyone that was inside the walls was having a relatively peaceful life.
It was like their own world and their own society, right? Obviously you had people who were very less fortunate in the slums underground. You had like the wealthy, crazy, privileged pieces of shit who like didn't want to give anything to anybody else. But you like in one perspective, that is could be considered like a stable place to live out your entire life in a way that was happy.
And it's like we were looking through this scope of, oh yeah, they need to fight the suppression of the fact that their memories have suppressed, and they need to break out of the walls, and then they'll be free. And then once that scope opened up and we realized that like, oh, once you broke out of that, everything's a little bit more complex than just, oh, you're suddenly free.
Which is interesting, because Eren and Armin both acknowledged this episode that outside of the walls, right? What the world really was not what they expected. And
even,
I think
like, hoped for.
I think you could make the argument that in the world that they have discovered, regardless of if you're an Eldian or not, there are always going to be some semblance of a wall in front of you, because that seems to be human nature.
Like, you can't move freely between nations, probably.
Yeah. I don't know, but I do think, though, that in Eren's mind, it doesn't matter to him what happens 100 years from now. I think it matters to him that within the next 50 years, or however long his friends live, they are going to experience a type of freedom that nobody else has gotten to in this entire world.
But then I have an argument to that case.
Okay.
My argument to that case is, if he purely cared about ensuring the freedom and happiness for this current people he knows, then when Armin says, Eren, you can stop, we'd be safe for another 100 years. See how that's a possible argument to what you just said?
I do, but I would argue against it by saying Eren's still alive. So it would be the fear, right, of peace for 100 years, rather than...
Not like true peace.
Correct. And it seems that there's a pretty big pattern going on that countless times in this show, after people have witnessed and experienced true trauma and horror and just traumatic events, a lot of them come out with this sense of perspective and wisdom and wanting to be better. So Eren, in his mind, could perhaps think, let's give the whole world that. And whoever is left, they will be truly free and at peace at that point.
Like, it's not like he's specifically, I think what we saw from this episode is that there is ways to escape the rumbling and be safe. And so it's not like he actually is like heat-seeking missile getting every single person that's not from the island like dead and gone.
I mean, I didn't see anybody else who, like, survived after the Titans walked past them.
Well, we know it's possible maybe if you got onto a ship, like we have people on a ship right now. Obviously, the Azumabitos, and, but I think what we're kind of seeing is that it might have been possible for people to maybe kind of get into the water after the Titans had left the water and then maybe have survived. I think that a possible route that Eren is going is to try to take out the founder with him in order to ensure peace.
Wouldn't you'd either have to change the rules and the anatomy of Titans themselves, which he has the power to do so, or wipe out all Eldians for that to happen, right?
I don't think so.
But how do you get rid of just the founding Titan? Wouldn't it be reborn into another?
The founder.
Oh.
The root of all of it.
Ymir?
He's linked to Ymir. Ymir called him. To me, 2,000, like to you, 2,000 years in the future. To me, 2,000 years ago. All that sort of thing. He is being shown side by side as a kid with Ymir. Ymir almost called him. He's the only one that's heard her voice and or heard her goal and mission and her hurt and felt the same. And I feel like because of that connection, then Eren is the chance of actually completely
shutting
almost
it off.
giving freedom finally to the founder even.
Like breaking Ymir's chains as well in a way.
Because Ymir's still trapped there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know how he'd do it other than something we don't know yet. You know what I mean?
It's like he's kind of saying like, you guys, it's almost like I know Armin used the word test, and then when they went and talked to him, he kind of went against them with that and was like, no, I mean, you can try to stop me, you know, but it could be somewhat of a test and or a challenge that the only way that you can succeed after what I do is if you can completely beat me. And if you can't beat me, then...
Do you think there's a possibility Eren knows something that we don't and they don't, and that in his potential goal of being killed by his friends, they would stop a cycle or affect the connection to Ymir or the redistribution of the Titan powers after death, and like he knows that his friends wouldn't kill him unless it came to this? Like, is there anything there?
I don't know, because after that last thing he said to them, I think he's really trying to tell them that the only thing they can do is kill him.
Yeah.
And he's reiterating it. He literally took them all out of the airship, metaphorically or within their minds, and said to them, hey, I know you guys are headed this way, and I know you want to talk, and I know what you want to say because I've been listening, and there's not going to be a discussion about this.
Yeah.
I brought you here to discuss that there's not going to be a discussion about this.
God.
Which we both, like, loved that
line. What if,
line.
like, at the start of this discussion, we were just like, you know, I know what you guys are used to. 2-hour-long discussions? No. I only brought you here to tell you there isn't going to be a discussion
to discuss
on this 1 hour
how,
of Attack on
why,
Titan.
and how.
Let's talk about how there's not going to be a discussion, yeah. Getting back, I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about once we get there to that episode about later on. But since, you know, before we're too far ahead, going back to the whole beginning of the episode and stuff, seeing Ymir through, I believe it was Ramsay's eyes instead of Leal, but from their perspective as they were about to get crushed was haunting. It was haunting.
I mean, like I said, like, Ymir was very unsettling in this episode. The feeling I have toward that character and their desire of kind of bringing about ruin, it's like that you're just like right there watching it. You know, you're watching these people get crushed.
Yeah.
And die.
You remember when we were... I can't remember if we talked about this in a discussion or after we finished or caught up to Attack on Titan, when I was telling you about if like you had to track, if you had to do what change, or if you had to make one change in reality to set all of this into motion, what it would be.
If I had to change one thing to
like,
set this
remember when you and I had the conversation that I was telling you, okay, if one thing was to happen that set everything that we've seen into motion, what it would be. Do you remember that conversation? We had it, and I can't remember if it was in the car or on the channel. Regardless, I had said that if one thing had to change to make everything begin, it was whoever the fuck left that pig pen open, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because whoever did was the reason that Ymir inevitably came across the thing that put us down this road, right?
The thing that gave the devil of all earth, the god that gave us this power.
Can Eren or the founding Titan, can they influence things like crazy corner, like outside of the Eldian control? Can they, like, that we just don't know yet? Like, it's like such a like big mysterious power that I'm almost not entirely sure or confident in saying that they, you know, it only has this much of effect.
What are the actual set rules? Like, this was this thing that Ymir happened upon. it might still exist and it might be more powerful than the power that was given to Ymir.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's still a giant question mark.
You know why I think that? For a fucking because typically I'm not into, like, when I do crazy theories, I try to stay within the guidelines of the rules given to us by this universe in anime. And I'm diverging from that a little bit because it seems like Eren was watching Armin through a bird at one point in this episode. And at that point, I was like, that's a little fucking weird, right? Because I understand Eren, I kind of understand Eren being able to tell where they all are on a plane, being able to, like, listen in because of the Eldian bloodline and stuff, right? But the visual of the bird on the ship looking at Armin, which then was followed by the kid Eren in that, like, sand-like world, which we got later on in the episode, I'm like, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
It was odd, right?
Yes.
But when after that horrifying, scene of Ramsey and Halil dying and everything else, and we just saw the footprints.
Yep.
You know where my mind went?
God, where?
I was like, oh, like I'd love to cast those footprints, like break out my field kit. Yeah, break out my field kit and, like, pour some, like, casting in there.
If there is a survival after this event, 100% they're making casts of those footprints.
Yeah, for,
and
like,
putting them in a
historical
museum.
legitimacy, right? Yeah, you'd have to do it. I don't know where
and
you
then
put it.
in, like, hundreds and hundreds of years, people are gonna be like, the rumbling? What? That was a
Didn't
conspiracy.
even happen.
It didn't even happen.
Man, what's next? One of them shot themselves instead of being...
yeah. I'm not surprised something
Yeah.
like that was included. Once it like, honestly,
it's just the detail. Like,
all the boxes seem to be checked with this show that, like, once I see something, I'm like, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
But, like, obviously I didn't think of it beforehand. It's just that once it happens, it makes sense to me. And having people decide that they weren't going to wait to be trampled and they were going to take their life into their own hands, freedom.
Yeah.
And having autonomy over life and death for yourself, it was totally believable for me. What made me laugh, the other thing that was really believable, were the people that were stealing from stores.
Looting,
and they were looting. And I was like, yep, sounds about right.
So, right before I wrote Eren can see through a seagull, I had written something about the line about the world not being, what it was cracked up to be.
Mm-hmm. The fire and ice and land and ice or whatever it was.
If you're an author and you're writing that line, does the thought of meta commentary cross you? The thought of, like, oh, I'm trying to tell my audience that this story is not what you think it's about, because the way that they built this world and story, we've talked about it on the channel for hours, and then in between you and I in conversations, that it's like the way that it started too. There's such wonder. There's such it's about the world, the history, like what's outside the walls, right? But then, like, further and further you go into the series, it becomes more and more personal. And then I still don't really know how much is left in this show. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I feel like the end of this show has to be personal. The end of the show has to be not otherworldly. It's going to affect this whole universe that we're in.
We have talked about that. The idea of what type of ending narratively in the spectrum of this world's existence and the life.
It's the hardest thing to do.
And we were like, maybe this story just needs to consist of the people we've already met and not necessarily show us what happens 100 years after they're gone. Mm-hmm. So
do you see the parallel potentially there?
Yeah, I also I want to latch on to something that you were saying, and it's that kind of idea that it's a multi-layered, it's not what you expect.
Yeah.
Once you learn it, it's not what you expect. Once you leave the walls, it's not what you expect.
Expectations.
Like, every time that you dig a little deeper or you go somewhere else, it's not what you expect. And for every character, they are expecting something different or something specific. Mm-hmm. Like, you might be expecting freedom, but then once you learn that's not there, you might be expecting that the landscape looks the way that you had dreamed it did. And I think that is on all layers, is that once you kind of break free and are like, now I'm gonna get what I want, then you realize like, oh, what, grass isn't always greener. What I wanted isn't necessarily exactly what I thought it was gonna be. I might regret some things. Like the Hizuru conversation.
Oh,
you know,
that was such a good conversation.
Like that the wanting to help your family and financial gain and that sort of thing might not have been the solution that you should have tried to go with, and maybe you should have tried to think of a different solution, which makes me think of a Hanji line. But if you want to say anything on what I just said before I read the Hanji line,
go for it.
Okay. I wasn't able to show Eren a solution, hope, or future.
I truly believe in, like, and I'm probably wrong, but just like what we're not talking for hours before we start the discussion, you know. What's in my like head or heart right now is that at one point in time, Eren was like totally open to hearing anything that he couldn't think of, you know.
Which
like,
is sad.
It is, but... like it's sad for Hanji, right? That mainly for me, like I would like I'd hate to know that like Hanji still after dying is like, well, I fucked up, because I think what we continue to see is that hindsight's 20/20, right? Like that's the whole fucking theme here, and
regrets, hindsight, it's not what you expected it to be.
Yeah.
Freedom, dreams.
God, Hanji, this episode, that's basically what's next, right? Fort Seta, I believe. And then Hanji, the next thing I've written down was Hanji agreeing with Yelena, which is right immediately before the line that you just said, because it's her acknowledging that, what they call it, the euthanization, but it's like sterilization, right? The sterilization plan was the way to go, for paraphrasing terms, right? I don't know. Like, I could never, like, sure, we're saying that after the fact, but I could never see any of our characters settling for that.
Even if they knew, I feel like, even if they
fight for a different way.
Say they saw the future in the same way that Eren does, and say that Eren maybe tried to fight against it at some point in his younger years and then realized it was kind of futile, you know, like he couldn't like fight against it. I'm sure that if they got a glimpse of that future and they were hearing about the euthanization plan, I feel like they would be like, no, you know, I bet we can still change it.
Yeah.
So yeah, hindsight 20/20.
Question.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Arnie? Ammon. What's the couple name for Annie and Armin? How do you feel about them as a...
I can't think of a good couple name.
As like a romantic, you know, I don't know. How do you feel about this direction?
Okay, so about this direction, I think that if you hadn't had the scenes of them that you did in like season 1, or how Armin like talked about Annie even after he knew who Annie was or what Annie did, even before he ate Berthold, the way that he spoke about Annie or thought about Annie, the conversations he had with Annie, the good person, bad person conversation.
You know what I'm fucking bringing up,
I think that it doesn't feel weird. I feel like this edition of the whole Berthold thing was only to cloud the idea of if it was truly Armin's feelings or not. In the same way that adding, oh, Mikasa, you're being controlled, and, you know, that's the reason that you care about me so much.
Yeah.
It's a cloud, them understanding themselves truly. It makes them feel hazy. Like, do I really understand myself? Is this truly how I feel? Like, both of them, both Mikasa and Armin were kind of given that feeling at the same time. But I feel like it feels good to me because of the groundwork that was kind of given to them, their personalities, especially early in Attack on Titan, conversations they had, how they bring back the conversation
bro,
here.
Don't get me started. Okay, fucking Armin. 14 minutes and 3 seconds into this bitch. I really do hate the phrase good person. I'm so happy.
And it's so cute because it's like she kind of gets up, like hoping that he says something.
Season 1, episode 23. Annie, do I really look like such a good person to you? Armin, a good person? Well, I don't really like that term. Because, to me, it just seems to mean someone who's good for you. I don't think there's any one person who's good for everyone. I fucking cannot agree with you more, like, about your idea with this relationship and shit. I am so glad they brought this back, because it immediately when it's happening, I'm like, oh my god, everything that happened in season 4, we spent so much time in Marley, this feels a little out of place, maybe rushed even, because Annie, you know, was in Stone, but then it really brings it all back. It's so well done.
And if you think about their themselves as characters, Armin, the way he thinks and the way that he speaks is exactly what Annie needs and desires to hear. It's a person that is going to talk to her and put things in a perspective that she will understand, appreciate, and, you know, that sort of thing. Like, it's the way that he speaks that makes sense to me of why she would reciprocate feelings. And
one line that, like, really, like, sold it for me was when Armin was like, I want Annie to stay Annie. I was like, knowing what her past was like and how her personality in general was very, how silenced, I don't know.
He wants her to make her own choices.
Seeing her break out of the shell that was her past and trauma, and then seeing how that meshes with Armin, and Armin's able to realize and acknowledge the fact that it's different. It's just so good. I loved it. I liked it a lot.
I mean, she was, when they're telling Annie that she doesn't need to fight anymore, like, all of them are being so kind and understanding to her about this. Like, she has not been in this fight for so long. Yes. But she was trapped in this basically an icicle, alone with herself from fighting, and she wakes up out of it, and her reason for fighting, she believes, is dead, her dad. And it's like, there's this layer of, like, are you treating her as a kid, and that's why you're like, Annie, you don't need to fight anymore, just stay here, you know, with Falco and Gabby, and make sure they don't leave the ship. But there's, like, it's just an interesting feelings there. Like, is it treatment like a child? Is it, I don't want to make someone do something that isn't in their nature to do. I want them to make that choice themselves, and all of us are resolving ourselves that we do want to go do this.
If Annie tells, if I am in love with Annie and Annie tells me that I'm done with fighting, I can't do it anymore, then I'm not going to make her.
You're going to be like, I don't want you to be someone that you're not.
Yeah.
And who is Annie? Someone that, like, has her own opinions.
Yeah.
And her own, like, if she wants to do something, she's going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we didn't get to see her do anything yet in this episode. When that girl pointed up in the sky, I was like, no way, it's a bird,
show
it's
me
a plane.
what the fuck this is gonna look
it's
like.
Falco.
Yeah, I need to see what the fuck it's gonna look like.
In hindsight, it's not a small decision. In hindsight, it's not a small decision. In hindsight, it's not a small decision.
In hindsight, it's not a small decision.